In 1993, a quirky bassline mistake, bathroom vocals, and cracked cymbals thrown from a second-story window combined to create one of alternative rock's most iconic songs. The song's unconventional structure with its odd-numbered verses and strategic starts and stops surprised even its creators when it became a massive hit, climbing to number 2 on the alternative charts and even earning a gold certification. What began as a commitment to hell in its lyrics would ironically become the band's ascent to mainstream success, helping their album Last Splash achieve platinum status and outsell all of Kim Deal's previous work with Pixies. In today's video, let's explore the path the Breeders took to write one of the most memorable songs of the 90s. The story of the Breeders begins with identical twin sisters Kim and Kelly Deal, who were raised in Dayton, Ohio, where they were exposed to the likes of Led Zeppelin, The Who, and Aerosmith. But it was a friend of Kim's from the West Coast that sent her the tapes of bands that truly influenced their future musical creations, Susie and the Banshees, Sex Pistols, and Elvis Costello. Unlike so many rock stars who grew up in broken homes and move around a lot, neither of this happened to the Deal sisters, who surprisingly came from a stable upbringing. Their father was a physicist while their mother worked with children. The sisters were even popular in school. The pair of sisters eventually formed a duo and started covering country tunes. Kim played guitar and sang while Kelly harmonized. They played truck stops and bluegrass bars, doing Delaney and Bonnie and Hank Williams covers. Kim and Kelly didn't really strive to become musicians, though, at least not initially. Kim went to college and got a 2-year diploma in biology, and Kelly, meanwhile, joined the military working at a local Air Force base. Kim eventually got married to a man named John Murphy and relocated to Boston working at a science lab. It was during this time that she saw an ad for the band Pixies, who were looking for a bass player, but she didn't play bass. But she quickly learned. Her sister Kelly, meanwhile, almost joined the group as a drummer, but things at that point in time didn't work out. Despite being alternative darlings and Kim being many people's favorite member of Pixies, she did end up co-writing one of Pixies' most popular tunes, Gigantic. It was on tour with Pixies in the late 90s, Kim befriended Throwing Muses guitarist Tanya Donnelly, and they quickly bonded over being creatively stifled within their respective groups. Misery loves company, right? This planted the initial seed of starting a new band, and one night, after attending a Sugar Cube show in Boston, the ladies danced and drank. With Deal recalling to the LA Times, "I said, Tanya, I got a great idea. We need to make a dance song and we'll be cool and rich. We'll be disco queens." Donnelly added, "We started it and figured out we couldn't do it for beans. We had no idea what to do. But then Kim had all these songs and we just decided to do that instead." This project proved to be a great creative outlet for both women. The pair ended up telling Ivo Watts Russell, the founder of Pixies label 4AD, what they were up to, and he was interested in the music that the pair had come up with and he wanted to put it out. Following the release of Pixies' hugely influential record 1989's Doolittle, frontman Black Francis sought to go solo for a little bit of time, giving Kim the perfect opportunity to put together her own band with Donnelly. Calling themselves the Breeders, the idea for the name came to Kim one day, who was at a bar and overheard several gay men talking about straight men who walked into a bar using the derogatory term breeder. Enlisting Surfer Rosa producer Steve Albini, the original lineup of the Breeders consisted of Tanya Donnelly on guitar, Josephine Wiggs on bass, and Britt Walford on drums. Wiggs, who played in the English band Perfect Disaster, had met Kim during one of Pixies' earlier tours of Europe, and they hit it off. Walford was suggested to the band by producer Steve Albini. Deal didn't play bass in her new band, though, doing vocals and instead playing guitar because, as she told one publication, she was a guitar player at heart. It was in 1990 the band put out their first record, Pod, which was recorded and mixed in just 11 days in Scotland. The band had spent some time before that writing and rehearsing in Wiggs' home in England. The album, whose lyrics seemed sex-obsessed, at least according to the media at the time, showed a different side of Kim, who told The Guardian, "I went through a period of growing out my underarm hair and not wearing makeup, and I said, this is my new womanhood. I'm not going to do anything that can be seen as sex to sell myself." But she soon took notice of Henry Rollins, who she thought was using sex to sell himself, and she changed her mind. Pod was praised by critics and got some traction thanks to their cover of the Beatles song Happiness is a Warm Gun, which got the attention of college radio. It also landed on many people's radar due to the fact that Nirvana's Kurt Cobain was a huge fan of the band, giving them shoutouts in the press and even listing Pod as one of his favorite albums. The album also made an appearance on the indie release charts in Britain, and the press around the time of Pod painted the Breeders as a side project for Kim, and there were a few from the UK press even labeling the group as a supergroup. Kim thought it was kind of ridiculous to be labeled a supergroup because their album was mostly found in the import section of a lot of record stores in the UK. As for it being a side project, she told an interviewer, "It's really weird that people consider it a side project. We're not like electronic. We had band members, an album we recorded. I always just thought I was in two bands." Maybe part of the reason people thought it was a side project is because the Breeders didn't tour a lot behind their first album. The press also focused on the female angle despite the Breeders not being an all-female group. Kim was dubious about the whole thing, telling the LA Times, "I just don't think women in rock do very good. When I see somebody screaming at me on stage, I at least want them to be able to beat me up before I'm going to believe them. They've got to have some element of danger to them." The band throughout their early history also became the butt of many jokes for having so many lineup changes, with some people thinking they had 5 drummers in their first several years, but they didn't. Original drummer Britt Walford drummed on the Breeders' releases under several pseudonyms, including Mike H. and Shannon Doughton. It wasn't lost on Kim, who even used a pseudonym herself when she was in Pixies, Mrs. John Murphy. By 1992, Pixies seemed to be done, as Black Francis ended the group over a fax, so the Breeders became active once again. It was around 1992 Tanya Donnelly left the Breeders to focus on her new band Belly, which had a hit with the song Feed the Tree, which was actually #1 on the Modern Rock Tracks chart, and even peaked at number 95 on the Hot 100. Kim's sister Kelly, who had never played guitar, joined the group as their new, guitarist. Kim and Josephine taught her how to play the instrument in about 2 weeks, as the band already had an invitation from Nirvana to open some European shows for them in the summer of '92. The New York Times perfectly summarized this type of career move, writing, "In most musical eras, this would hardly be a recipe for chart-topping success, but courageous amateurism was all the rage in the early 90s. In their quest for authenticity, fans and record executives alike were seeking underdogs to make it to heroes." Kelly had previously rejected Kim's offer to join the Breeders, as at the time she was working as a computer analyst at a subsidiary for defense contractor Litton Industries. She even had security clearance. But witnessing the Breeders' first few years changed Kelly's mind, telling a Phoenix paper, "After Pod got released, I realized it was Kim's vision, it was Kim's music, and then I said, hey, I want to get involved." Kelly initially took a leave of absence from her job, but soon quit it completely after the Breeders took off. As for why Kim chose her sister, who didn't know how to play the instrument, she admitted to spin, "I prefer melody. If I had to choose between a simple melody and a really complicated rudiment sitting in the middle of a good song, I would prefer a simple melody every time." The Breeders issued an EP in April of 1992 called Safari. The EP contained 4 tracks, one of which was a cover of Pete Townshend's song So Sad About Us. The band added a new drummer during this period, fellow Dayton, Ohio native Jim McPherson. McPherson was playing in a local Dayton band called the Raging Mantras, and he and his bandmates already knew who Kim was since she was a local celebrity. It was McPherson and a fellow bandmate of his who worked at a local record store who used to flyer Kim's house, hoping she would make one of their gigs. One day, as they were flyering Kim's home, she ran into them and asked the pair if they would be interested in playing on some of her demos. McPherson ended up joining the group as their full-time drummer, and McPherson had grown up with several sisters, so he was comfortable being around a lot of women. As the band were doing shows and press for Safari, the label issued a press release to reporters on how to get the Breeders to like them. It read, "Bring Taco Bell, don't talk about women in rock, think Evil Dead 2 is a great movie, know the video for Safari pays homage to Black Sabbath." The band's publicist even added, "Don't ask Kim about her other band, Pixies." In fact, even the band's press kit made no mention of Kim's connection to Pixies, instead writing that Kim and Kelly played in a disco band and played as an acoustic duo at truck stops, saloons, weddings, and clubs. As far as Kim was concerned, she saw a clear divide between Pixies fans and Breeders fans, telling Spin, "Pixies fans didn't know about the Breeders. Maybe they did in England, but I don't know." Following their tour with Nirvana in the summer of '92, the band headed back home to the States to record their next LP. The Breeders had groups like Nirvana and the Pacific Northwest acts, as well as the Smashing Pumpkins, to thank for bringing alternative rock to the mainstream. The band headed from Ohio to California to work at Coast Recorders in North Hollywood with producer Mike Freegard. They also spent some time in San Francisco at Brilliant Studios in the Mission District. Prior to heading out west, though, the band did spend some time in Ohio at Cro-Magnon Studios, which was a tiny warehouse that was originally built in the 1800s to service trains coming into the state. It was a lot less prestigious than the studios they later found themselves working in California, but they struggled to get the sound they had in Ohio. Brilliant Studios had been used for a lot of jazz records, and the studio space was small and dry, and the band was burning through a lot of money trying to replicate the sound that they had established back home in Ohio. The Mission District also proved to be pretty scary to the members. McPherson recalled to Bandcamp, "It was super scary. Josephine and I would walk ourselves through the Mission District, and I personally, on purpose, wore a sweatshirt that had a red stain on it I had done a construction job with. I was terrified." The band released their landmark record, 1993's Last Splash, through 4AD and Elektra. It proved to not only be the Breeders' breakout record and their most successful album of their career, but it went on to outsell all of the Pixies albums combined and Black Francis' solo works. The big difference between the band's first and second record was that the songs on their second record had been played live extensively. Last Splash contained one of the most iconic songs of the early 90s, Cannonball. The song was originally titled Grunggae since it blended island riffs with grunge. The demo of the song was even included on the 20th anniversary re-release of The Last Splash in 2013.
I'm curious, I mean, this is a bit of a strange question, but I'm curious as to how little pieces come up in the studio and what the thought processes are behind them. The beginning to Cannonball, it's a very weird sound. Why did that come up?
Well, I knew I wanted to do that through the song. It's like a oompa, dee, whatever, dee. You know that Willy Wonka thing? Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory?
Oh, yes.
Those little oompas walking around. Like a working man, working the chain gang kind of sound, isn't it? I don't know, it's just got a kind of like a nice ridge to it. It's like it swells a little bit. So of course I was using my distorted, amplifier, so we just started it up like that.
So what on earth prompted that thought to come to your mind at that point?
I don't know. And Josephine then goes da-da-da-da-da. And she's like a one flat. She's flattened her bass out. She's like one step down. So, that sounds cool, Josephine, but it was a mistake, Kim. Do that all the time. So now she has to do her mistake over and over again because she starts low and then she has to pull up to the right key. So she thinks it sounds good too, though.
As for the rhythm, the introduction was constructed from metallic clicking on the snare rim and cymbal stand, which was tapped by Jim McPherson. He did about 10 minutes worth of little stick intros until Kim found one that she liked. Kim wasn't happy with the sounds of the cymbals during the recording of the album and thought they were ringing out too much. So Kim and Jim would drop the cymbals from the second floor of the studio into the parking lot in an effort to crack them. The music video for Cannonball was directed by both Kim Gordon of Sonic Youth and Spike Jones. It showed the band performing the song in a garage while Kim and her sister Kelly appear in a dressing room they redecorated. It's interspersed with shots of a cannonball rolling through the Miracle Mile in Los Angeles and Kim singing underwater. The video soon got heavy play on MTV, with McPherson recalling to Spin, "We had a buzz clip on MTV. That was a huge deal. Now our video was on at noon, at 9 a.m., and every 3 or 4 hours. I remember seeing it on TV for the first time sitting in my little apartment in Huber Heights off Powell Road. There was a commercial with a bunch of old people doing old people dances like sock hop dancing to Cannonball." The artwork for the single Cannonball was designed by in-house 4AD artist Vaughn Oliver. His first proof was not the iconic fuzzy red helmet that we all know, but rather a testicle protruding out from a piece of cardboard. This, of course, was rejected in place of the red helmet. The song ended up peaking at number 2 on the alternative airplay chart and number 32 on the mainstream rock tracks chart, and was even a crossover hit, peaking at number 44 on the Hot 100. As for the inspiration for the song, some hypothesized it was about Black Francis from Pixies, but it was actually Kelly Deal who proved to be the inspiration behind it. Kelly was reading a book on French writer Marques De Sade, with Kim telling an interviewer the message of the song as a whole was making fun of Sade and his libertarian views that if he was better off than someone, then they were just fodder for him, playthings. It was saying, come on, life's not a contest. The album had another 2 charting singles in Divine Hammer and Saints, which peaked a number of 28 and 14 on the alternative airplay chart. The Last Splash, for its part, peaked at number 33 and went platinum, the band's only record to do so. While the band was in Europe touring behind the album, they actually had no idea the record was taking off. It wasn't until they got home and saw Cannonball all over MTV that they realized how big of a deal it was. Kim recalled, they played the video a lot. Jim came back from tour and his dad said, "What's the name of the band you're in? I think I see it." Nobody knew us. We were from Ohio. But Jim's dad knew. When Cannonball became huge, the band also noticed a massive shift in their audiences. It also helped that by late 1993, the band was once again invited by Nirvana to tour with them in support of their new album at the time, In Utero. Some of their fans thought Last Splash was the group's first record. Even Kim, who never really got recognized in public for being in Pixies, started getting recognized by teenagers at malls in Dayton, Ohio. Kelly added to Spin, "I remember going to lunch with my mom and dad and Kim. We went to the Olive Garden, which was near the mall. People were looking at us. Then people started clapping. We got a spontaneous round of applause at the Olive Garden." Cannonball went on to become the Breeders' biggest commercial success of their career and one of the most recognizable alternative rock songs of the decade. It was quickly met with praise as New Musical Express, Melody Maker, and The Village Voice named it as one of the best singles of 1993. Kim looked back at the song's success, telling Bandcamp, "I do remember being surprised that it was received so well because Cannonball doesn't really repeat correctly. It does have a chorus, but the verses are wild. They're odd numbers. It stops and starts. There's all this feedback everywhere. I didn't hear that and go, radio hit." The album at least made Kim a good deal of money. She bought a nicer home in Dayton and a vacation home in Nantucket. The song was later featured prominently in the trailer for the 1999 film South Park, bigger, longer, uncut, and was even used in a Nissan commercial.
It's not just another day in the park. South Park, bigger, longer, and uncut.
The band Fish also covered the song at a concert, as did Courtney Barnett.
I know you're a cannonball. I know you're a cannonball.
The Breeders went through a lot of turbulent years following the success of Cannonball and The Last Splash. These years were filled with substance abuse, lineup changes, and a lot of money being thrown around. The Last Splash era of the band did reunite on the 20th anniversary of the record. The Breeders are still around today, and they've put out 3 more LPs and a handful of EPs. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.